Good morning. Welcome to another edition of the PreMarket PulseScan with yours truly, Dex the Algo Capitalist, aka the Vulcan, coming to you live from PulseWaveTrading.com, home of the world famous PulseWave price trigger reports that we place in your hand each and every day. All right, so what do we have going on up in here? Well, we got the markets pretty much mixed across the board, and doesn't look like that's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So here's how it's looking. The Dow is down 126 points at 28,290. The NASDAQ 100 is up 61 points at 12,175. E-mini S&P 500 down 2.25 at 34.96 half. Russell My Hustle down 6.3 at 15.55 even. The mighty Bitcoin Futures Composite Index is trading up $185 at 12,020. We got Nat Gas, that's right, down a whopping 9 cents, trading at $2.53. We got crude oil futures up 45 cents at $43.05 a barrel. The long bond futures are down 17.30 seconds, trading at 175 and 6/30 seconds. Gold futures up $17.80, trading at $1,996.40 after topping out in the overnight session of $2,001.20 per ounce. Silver is back above $29 this morning, up 43 cents, trading at $29.02 after topping out earlier this morning at $29.23 per ounce. Taking a look at the U.S. dollar index, it is hemorrhaging, bleeding out on the floor, down 34 pips, trading at 91.79, only inches away from the overnight low of 91.74. I warned you and told you that the dollar was headed to that 91 handle, and that's exactly what we got. I also warned you that the euro dollar was flirting with hitting that 120, and this morning we did it. The euro dollar is up 62 pips, trading at 120.02. So the target has been reached on the euro. Do we pull back immediately from here? It will be very interesting to find out. We got the pound sterling up 91 pips. It is on fire, trading at 134.70. The Aussie is up 4 pips at 73.93. And the Canadian dollar right now is down 15 pips at 130.31. Euro yen catching a bid here, up 49 pips at 126.92. Dollar yen off 10 pips at 105.78. And in New Zealand, the Kiwi is up 36 pips at 67.73. Beans pulling back slightly this morning, down 2.5, trading at 9.51 even. Corn pulling back 3 3/4 points at 3.54 even. And wheat down 1 3/4 points at 5.50 even. So a little bit of profit taken over there this morning, which is to be expected. All right, here's your market news for the morning. We got Warren Buffett, scoring a $570 million gain on his new Japanese stocks in just 2 days. Warren Buffett is famous for moving markets when he makes a bet, as the other investors trust his judgment and pile into whatever he's bought. The Buffett effect may have generated a $570 million gain for its namesake in just 2 days. They're keeping this man in positive news flows on a daily basis. You have to ask yourself, why is that? Especially being an agent of the Fed. Expect greater tensions between the U.S. and China no matter who wins the election, Fitch says. Policy on China has quickly emerged as one of the most contentious issues of the U.S. 2020 presidential election. Economist L. Ellerin, famous guest on both Bloomberg and CNBC, says derivatives show retail traders may be drowned by a large correction in stocks. Mohammed El Ellerin said in an op-ed with the Financial Times, retail investors should consider the outlook of the options market to prepare for a stock market correction following explosive gains over the last 5 months. Goldman Sachs boosts 2021 oil forecast and recommends Brent as an effective hedge against uncertainty for investors. Goldman Sachs expects the oil market to gain momentum in 2021 as the coronavirus-induced lockdown created a slump in demand is mitigated by the rising likelihood of widely available vaccines next spring. You need to insert the word mandatory vaccines next spring. U.S. investing championship hopeful Matthew Caruso landed a 382% return in the first half of 2020. He shares a unique twist he's putting on a classic trading strategy in 3 stocks he's holding right now. JP Morgan's laying out 2 reasons to bulletproof your portfolio with some particular stocks. Facebook is warning it can remove any content that might put it in a regulatory or legal risk. Facebook is giving itself broader license to remove any content that could result in regulatory or legal headaches for the company. But of course, they're not laying out any guidelines for you. It's just whatever they feel. In other words, they're giving themselves carte blanche to basically censor anything that they don't like. Doesn't have to give a reason. Doesn't have to give a reason. Just like the NDAA Authorization Act. We think you're a terrorist. You have no rights. So Facebook will say, we think your article was whack. So we're going to delete it. But it's not this or that. Well, according to us, it is. So it's basically whatever they think. Global stocks are mixed. European stocks are up, but the UK's FTSE 100 is down 1.3%. Most Asian benchmarks finished the day modestly higher. Futures underlining the U.S. markets are ranging between being up 0.2% and 0.8% respectively. But notice I didn't talk about the down part because the Dow is down over 100 points. Earnings coming in, Old Mutual Limited and BKW AG second quarter 2020 earnings are coming in. And the U.S. Fed's Bernard speech and total vehicle sales are due out today. So not a whole lot going on in that regard. Excuse me. Let's see what else we got going on here. Let me check the radar here. Let's see. Anything interesting? Nah. Except for JCPenney's is on the verge of liquidation after mall talks collapse. Let's see. We got stocks along with silver soaring for the last 5 months straight, and bonds and the dollar looking mad weak. And we got panic buying in Tesla and Apple. And I think they're going to be sorely hurt after the fact. Let's see here. Let's see. Elon Musk surpasses Zuckerberg as the world's 3rd richest person with $110 billion net worth. And he is laughing all the way to the bank. Even though he can't build a car, he's sure enough profiting off of that lack of ability to build a car that doesn't have the bumper falling off in the middle of the road while you're driving. Let's see here. There is talk of a market correction only because today is September the 1st and we're only a month away from Rocktober. Now, if you have been keeping track, the market has defied that over the last few years, and we have not had a Rocktober. We have not had these tremendous corrections. They just haven't been there. Let's see here. Something good to talk about. Some days it just isn't anything to talk about. Let's see here. I see there's some more infighting. Let's see here. What else we got? Oh, okay. Yep. Now I remember what I wanted to talk about. Now I remember. Now I remember. I remember what I want to talk about. Okay. Yeah, there are some things that have been brought to my attention. And I can't always remember because my mind is in so many different places. Let's see. I don't like having to talk about things that I don't like talking about, but sometimes I get hit up and my inbox is like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Just on a whole nother level. Let's see here. All right. I have to go ahead and give you the trigger warning up front. Excuse me. The views that we're about to discuss are not necessarily the direct thoughts and reflections and opinions of PulseWaveTrading.com. Viewers should be advised that some certain words, keywords, may trigger people with lower brainwave function. If you have an IQ under 80, it is advised that you should watch this with your mommy or your daddy if you're listening to this broadcast. Yep, had to put that disclaimer out there. All right. Trigger warnings all over the place. You're not gonna like to hear what is being said because they're very controversial. But nonetheless, they need to be talked about because this is an election that's coming up. The election is coming up, and we need to talk about the issues that are out here. So, are y'all ready? So, first of all, remember that we have been watching the destabilization of the United States of America. According to the ex-KGB officer, this is a plan. This was a plan of the Soviet Union going all the way back many decades, and that we were told that by a certain point, which we are now well beyond that point, the point was about 20 years. They said if things didn't change within a 20-year time period, and that was 1983, so that would have been 2003. Okay. All right. So yeah, I know. We had until 2003 to change things, and we didn't. We did not change things. As a matter of fact, before 2003, what happened? We had two things. We had 2000 and we had 2001. We all know what happened in 2000, and we definitely know what happened in 2001. 2001 marked the fulfillment and the ending of the 20-year cycle that the KGB agent was talking about. So they let us know that they finished ahead of schedule. It was supposed to be 2003, but we actually finished in 2001. Taking down the towers was a symbolic move that said, yes, we have now brought down this empire. The U.S. empire is gone. It's no longer what it was. We have won. There was another tactic that was used, and this one was around the mid 90s, I want to say, the mid 90s. We were told by the same quote unquote terrorist organizations that the U.S. had been at war with for the last 30 years that the United States was going to become a Islamic state by the year 2020. Well, here is the year 2020. What has happened in the United States, and what does it mean when they said that it would be a Muslim state. Well, if you understand what Islam truly represents, then you would understand that it's more about a political system and a governmental body than it is a religion. That model of totalitarianism is being extended all over the world. Primarily, if you ask anybody in Great Britain, they'll tell you they're having the darndest time dealing with the Sharia law. They allowed Sharia law to be enforced in certain sections of the country, which is bananas when you think about it. Like, that actually happened. Yeah, it happened. And they're pushing for it here in certain parts of the United States. Yeah, man. Would they allow certain neighborhoods to be governed by whatever the prevailing religious um, perspective is, and they'll let them go. Yeah. So when you think about the young people pushing for socialism, that is the beginning stage. Remember, socialism is the gateway drug to tyranny. All right? Socialism is the gateway drug to tyranny, to totalitarianism. All right? Because the selling point that they get you, the Pied Piper of socialism, tells you that everyone will have a chicken in a pot and 40 acres and a mule. They promise you that the government is going to take care of you. Everyone will have money. No one will be poor. Everyone will have free health care. Everything is free. Free health care, free money, free everything. You want a car, free house. Everything is free. All right. Everything is free. Free, 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 free. You know, no more capitalism, no more big, large Fortune 500 companies, no more any of that. That's what they tell you. That's what they convince you to believe. And then they cement the belief system with the universities. The universities continue the propaganda message that the answer to all things that ill us in the West, is we need to be a socialist country. That's what they tell you. They say, here, smoke this joint. The joint is called socialism. It's a gateway drug to totalitarianism. All right? Because they had to find a better name to make it more attractive, especially to young people. So you say this is democratic socialism, you know, or you say this is hip hop socialism. Whatever slick term, trendy term you want to put on it, they say that's what this is. All right, this is the Xbox socialism. This is PlayStation 5.0 socialism. Whatever young people want to hear. All right, this is cap socialism. Whatever. Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. Okay. And at the end of the day, it all leads back to totalitarianism. All roads lead to totalitarianism. But that's what they don't tell you. And part of this process to get you to try the gateway drug, to eventually get you to the hard drug of totalitarianism, they have to first convince you to take it. How do they do that? With peer pressure. Peer pressure comes in the form of group think. Group think. Follow the herd. Opening bell for those of you who have to handle some business, move some stops. Go ahead and handle your business. So, what do we mean by group think? Well, think about it. Without thinking, you just act. You see the herd going one way and you go the same direction. You never think about it. You never question it. You just do. Enter stage left, the pandemic. Now, the WHO warns that no country can just pretend the pandemic is over as Trump embraces herd immunity. You see, they're saying that it isn't fashion unless we say it is. I know you heard that before, right? To the gatekeepers of the fashion industry. It's not fashion unless we say it is. So the WHO is saying it's not over until we say it is. And of course, if Trump loses the White House, it will conveniently be over immediately. You know that. Well, the WHO Director General on Monday said that during the organization's latest Tuesday virtual news conference, where everyone had to wear a mask, you get it, from its Geneva headquarters, that no country can just pretend the pandemic is over, as governments around the world ease social distance restrictions and start to send children back to the classroom. That's right. And in some areas, children are headed back into the schools. Some universities have even reopened their doors and people are attending class physically, not virtually. So it's just the latest example of how this head of the WHO is implicitly criticizing Trump and his handling of the U.S. outbreak after Trump recently insisted the virus is under control, despite flare-ups in the Sun Belt states. Now, the more control countries have over the virus, the more they can open up. Opening up without having control is a recipe for disaster. It's not one size fits all. It's not all or nothing, the director says. Sure. Now, the director described 4 essential things that all countries, communities, and individuals must focus on to take control of the virus before they start to unwind their emergency measures. Note, they will never unwind their emergency measures, even if and when all things reopen. First, he says you must prevent amplifying events. COVID-19 spreads very efficiently among clusters of people. Sounds like a whole lot of other viruses I can think of. Second, reduce deaths by protecting vulnerable groups, including older people, those with underlying conditions, and essential workers. Haven't been doing a very good job of that because, as we know, it's been ramaging through the senior homes. Third, individuals must play their part by taking the measures we know work to protect themselves and others. Measures we know work? Hasn't there been like multiple studies showing that masks do nothing for you? Very interesting. Stay at least 1 meter away from others. Clean your hands regularly. Practice respiratory etiquette and wear a mask. So now they call it respiratory etiquette by wearing a mask. Respiratory etiquette. So they make up these terms. Respiratory etiquette. Good grief. And fourth, governments must take tailored actions to find, isolate, test, and care for cases and trace and quarantine contacts. Widespread stay-at-home orders can be avoided if countries take temporary and geographically targeted interventions. In other words, this is what they are saying. Either you get down or you lay down. You follow these mandates and these orders, do exactly as we say, or there will be hell to pay. That's basically what they're telling you. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. How do we know that everything that he just spit is absolute nonsense? Well, let's just say that the CDC finally admitted that we were being lied to about everything about coronavirus. And only something like 6%. 6% is what we're looking at. That means the other 94% of people survived this. 6% of people did not. And they admitted of the 6%, these were individuals who were elderly and had compromised immune systems and or severe underlying medical issues. So, of the 6% from the 100%, those 6% is because they had other underlying medical issues, serious medical issues and or were compromised in their immune system because they were elderly. They finally admitted that long after the fact, long after the damage has been done, long after the fact that hundreds of mom and pops and major corporations have gone into bankruptcy, long after 50 plus million jobs have just vanished into thin air, never to come back and be seen or heard from again. Now you want to put on your website, oops, we were wrong. 96 people out of 100 survive the virus. Now, the other 6% out of the 100, it's not that there's a 6% mortality rate. No, 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 not at all. No, no, not at all. It's less than 1%. It's just that these 6% are people who are already sick anyway. So to give you a good analogy that will help to bust this open for those that have lower brainwave frequency activity up there in that cerebral cortex region, let me help you out. This is analogous to a person getting into the ring with Mike Tyson in his prime. This person is getting into the ring with Tyson, and here's their situation. They have a broken wrist. They have a fractured skull, and their left leg just came out of hip replacement surgery, total hip replacement surgery the day before. And he's getting into the ring with Mike Tyson in his prime. Okay? What do you think the outcome is going to be? Versus, let's say, Holyfield getting into the ring with Tyson in his prime. Who do you think is going to survive the match with Tyson? Obviously, it's going to be Holyfield, not the individual that's getting into the ring with the concussion, a broken wrist, and he just had total hip replacement surgery the day prior to the boxing match. We already know what this is, and they knew what this was too. Anyone who's already sick, basically, and saying you already got 1 foot in the grave, if you catch the coronavirus, it's probably going to take you out. Just like the flu can take you out. If you're already sick, catching the flu is a bad thing for you. If you have like no immune system, then pretty much anything can take you out. And that's basically what they're saying. And they knew this all along, but yet they still chose to lock down the country and bankrupt the country in the process. Yeah, they said it was that's what we got to do for something that is not even as deadly as the common flu. Whack is what they are. That's why every single last one of these bums need to be ran out of office come November. You always say, what can we do? This is what you can do. Vote every Republican and Democrat out of office. From the presidency all the way down. Straight up. All right? Put all independents in there. All right? You want to do away with all of this? That's what you need to do. You want to do away with crony capitalism? That's what you need to do. That's what you need to do. And you need to enforce laws and rules and refuse to be bought out and paid off. And you need to overturn the rules that give the Senate and Congress and all of these bought and paid for individuals, remove the immunity from them so that they cannot legally do insider trading, and make sure that they cannot leave office richer than when they came into the office. That should not be allowed. Payola should not be allowed, period. Period. Everybody should have checks and balances like it's supposed to be. You don't need to enact new laws. You just need to practice the ones that are already on the book and do away with all the protectionism. No protectionism for your corporations. No protectionism for your vaccine manufacturers. Nobody. If you're going to ask these companies to spend money and create any kind of vaccine, it needs to be tested. You need to do those double and triple blind studies and the animal studies and Nothing swept under the rug. You need to relieve everyone at the FDA who has any kind of economic ties to the medical industry, because that's a conflict of interest. You can't hire someone who used to work at Monsanto or any other pharmaceutical company. You need to do away with all of that. You need to overhaul all of that. Do away with the corruption from the top down. Remove corruption. That's all you got to do. It's not hard. Just remove the corruption and make it so that these lawmakers do not get rich while they're in office. Make it illegal and forbid for them or anyone in their family to be financially enriched while they're in office. Period. And arrest anyone who is involved in any kind of commerce that is a conflict of interest while they're in office. Straight up. That's what you need to do. Overhaul corruption. And that is every industrial complex, from the prison industrial complex all the way down. Overhaul the justice system, the legal system, all of that. Overhaul it all. Take away the corruption. Take away all the conflict of interest. It's not hard. It can be done in a week. You want to clean house? You want to drain the swamp? That's all you got to do. Remove the corruption and all the avenues that make corruption easy. Don't let people get away with this stuff. And take all of them out of office and throw every single last one of them in jail, because they're all complicit with the destruction of the United States. Arrest and lock them all up. Throw them in the FEMA camps. Throw every congressman and every senator in the slammer. Every mayor, every governor. Get all of them up out of here. Arrest every single last one of them and put in the independents. You want to remove corruption? That's all you got to do. But I'm going to tell you why they're not going to do that. Because you know how they say the pen is mightier than the sword? Well, unfortunately, that is true. The pen is much mightier than the sword. People are not going to do it because they love corruption. You see, all you have to do, and they're very good at this, they know how to go out and find the most desperate people, the poorest of the poor, people who are desperate, who are starving, people whose ribs are touching, or people who may be compromised in other areas so they can be easily blackmailed and manipulated. Trust and believe the briefcase solves all ills as far as they're concerned. They roll up on you with that briefcase full of money and say, take this, you shut up, look the other way. And that's all they usually need to do. They don't have to threaten anybody. They don't have to do any gangster tactics, more gangster than that. They just hit you with the briefcase. Briefcase ain't good enough for you, hit them with the suitcase. Suitcase ain't good enough for you, back up the armored truck. Every man has his price. Like the $1 Million Man used to say back, Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man back in the WWF. Remember that? He said, every man has his price. That's all you got to do. Find a person's price and hit them with it. Bam. Add a few zeros on that check. The person, they're turned easily. Most people are turned easily. But then those that are stubborn, you say, okay, fine. Not only are you going to still take the briefcase, but here's an envelope for you, and it's full of compromising pictures of you that you would never want to get out. Or let's say here, we have a movie I want you to watch, and they will show you video with audio of private meetings that you had that were extremely questionable, websites that you have visited that are extremely questionable. They'll pull out some tape of you making racist comments or what have you, and it'll just destroy you. They'll destroy you physically. That's the last resort. If they got to do that, they'll do that. But most time they're just threaten to destroy people that you love. You know, your brother is a criminal, career criminal. We'll throw the book at him and give him life in prison. Or you know what? No, we're going to arrest your mother because we think your mother was complicit in some of the things you did. So we're going to arrest your mother. Hey, it worked for Rayful Edmond. Instead, they were going to lock his mother up for the rest of her life, and that's when he starts singing like a canary. They know how to lean on the right people. That's why they only get people that are compromised or people who have like no morals and are easily overtaken with that briefcase. So I don't think you guys appreciate how thick the briefcase usually is. It's mad thick. All right. Full of hundreds. And sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes they be like, nah, the briefcase is old school. We're gonna hit you with this little envelope right here. You open that little thin envelope and it has a check in there, or cashier's check for like $1 trillion, and you're like, okay, you know what? I am starting to see things your way now. Or they'll say, you know what? No, we're in a digital age now. We don't even do checks anymore. Log into your bank account real quick for me, real quick. Tell me how many zeros you see in your account now. Remember yesterday you were deficit $100 in your account. Well, now you got 100,000 in your account. Oh my goodness! Yep, and there's more to come if you just play ball with us. That's what they do. That's how corruption is allowed to flourish, because of that money, that bread. All right, that bread. I'm telling you. But if you remove those temptations, right, and you start arresting people, what would have happened if they would have arrested the tobacco industry back in the day when they were doing all their dirt? I mean, they basically did what they hit him with those billions and billions of dollars lawsuits, but it still didn't go far enough, because most people who are the real guilty people, they don't usually fall. They find a patsy, a fall guy to take the fall for them. But what happened if they start arresting heads of corporations? What happened if you start seeing senators and congressmen being marched out in handcuffs? See what I'm saying? And what would happen if you say, you know what, we're going to enact this new rule for you war hawks that are part of the military-industrial complex? You want to go to war? Well, according to the rules, you have to send one of your loved ones on the front line. And if you don't have any kids to go, then you or your spouse has to go. Front lines. You be the first one to fire the first shot. You want to go to war? Then you get to go to war. Put on this outfit. Here's an M16. Bye-bye. Front lines. Infantry. And I don't mean he's the commander. I mean, you have to be a straight up private in the war that you pushed for. You got to fight in it yourself, and not as anyone in authority. You got to fight like right next to the private. That's right. You want to go to war so bad? You hate this country so bad? Give this person a pistol and say, go in the front lines, private. You don't get to be in a leadership position. You don't get to be somewhere cushy in an ivory tower somewhere calling plays on the battlefield. Nah, you right there on the front lines. I wonder how much war we have if that was a rule, including the president. Mr. President, you want to go bomb XYZ country? Well, here's the rules. Here's the rules. You have to go over there and do it yourself. Strap him on a helmet and go ahead, private. See, the way we have it now, the president is commander in chief. So he's chilling somewhere in a bunker while everybody else is out fighting and dying, while your daughters and sons are out there dying on the battlefield. He's chilling. He never seen combat. Nah, the rule is if you want to go to war, you got to lead it. It's like in the famous movies that we like watching, where the two different tribes are fighting. What do you see? You see the chief riding with his people. You see the head dude riding with his people. They going out like the old movie. Y'all know movies I'm talking about. The king is on a horse too. He ain't being protected. He out there battling too. Yeah. You want to be a war hawk? Okay. Lead by example. Strap on your boots and let's go. Let's see how you get down. Give him a pistol. Let's go. I guarantee you we wouldn't see all this military-industrial complex nonsense if you made that a rule. Every general, every captain, don't matter. Major, whatever your rank is, you got to be on the front lines with your people. You don't get to be in the background. No, you have to be in harm's way too. All of you. All of you. Yep. Give people a taste of reality for once. And all of you people out there crying for socialism and free healthcare and all this other stuff, not understanding economics, having no understanding of economics whatsoever. Let them be the first people to taste all that. You want free healthcare? Okay. Do you understand that in order for this to happen, you lazy bum, you have to go out and get a job and go to work? because we're going to take 100% of your paycheck, because that's what it's going to require for all these free things and free services that you want. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and I need you to go to work, and I need you to give me your check, all of it. So you want free healthcare, and you want a superior healthcare industry where no one has to basically be sick and die. You want a real cure for cancer? Oh, we can do that. We can definitely do that, but do you understand what it's going to cost you? See, that's why it's never going to happen, because you would put all the pharmaceutical industry out of business. The pharmaceutical industrial complex would be out of business. There's no business in cures. That's why you never hear the pharmaceutical industry talking about cures. They only talk about treatments, not cures. Because that's not what they teach in medical school. They teach that the body cannot cure and heal itself. It needs synthetic drugs. All you can do is make the patient comfortable, but you can't ever heal them. They have to be on drugs for the rest of their natural life. There's no money in cure, only treatment. Remember that. So if you really want free healthcare, don't stop there. Let's do it right. How about correct healthcare? Do away with treatment of symptoms and get to healing. Put incentive in there for healing, since you want all this free stuff. So revamp the healthcare industry and say, you know what? You're no longer allowed to make drugs that treat anything. We want cures. You want to be a pharmaceutical company, then you have to prove that you have a cure for something. Cure it, eradicate it. Because right now, as it stands, the sheeple are confused. We have a healthcare industry that doesn't heal anything, but yet they want you to believe that they can come up with a cure for COVID-19, a vaccine for COVID-19 that's going to cure COVID-19. You and I both know there's no money in cure. Whatever vaccine they come up with is not going to cure anything. See, the people that had real cures for diseases, did you know that there were individuals that found cures from everything from AIDS to cancer, every cancer? There are people, brilliant people, who found cures for just about everything under the sun, but they were all executed and murdered, or so marginalized and ostracized in the medical community that they lost their license to practice. And so now they've been pushed out to obscurity. They will not allow anyone to come forth with a cure for any disease, because it would put the medical industrial complex out of business. That's why they will never allow it. But you say you want this, though, right? Understand what it is that you really want and what you're really asking for and what it's going to take to get it, because that's what you need. You don't need free healthcare. You don't need the healthcare that exists today, because it's not healthcare. It's not keeping you in good health. It's just treating your symptoms, and that's it, and try to make you comfortable enough to live with the symptoms. But it's not curing anything. That's why they took out Dr. Sebi and many like him. Do you know how many homeopaths have died just in the last 20 years from mysterious circumstances? Do you know how many scientists, especially those that work, with the bioweapons and things of that nature, do you know how many of them have died from mysterious circumstances? And not just them, their whole families. Oh, yeah. Hundreds. We lost count. There were channels on YouTube that were dedicated simply to keeping track of all the mysterious disappearances and deaths of all the homeopathic type doctors, or any doctor that said we have a cure for something, or even just medical practitioners or herbalists, you name it. People who practice Eastern medicine who said, yes, I've cured 1,000 people. If they haven't scrubbed the internet of it, there should still be several of these documentaries on YouTube. There are well-documented cases of human beings that have cured people, documented. only to be assassinated not long afterwards, or marginalized and ostracized in the medical community. It's been a quack. Why do you think they took out Dr. CB, man? And other people like him. I'm just saying, you really want this. You want free healthcare? No, you don't. You want cures. That's what you really want. You want cures. But there's no money in cure. But you know what? You could make it so, since you want, this is what you want, you could make it so that there is incentive for making cures. You could put money in cure. You could build incentives for cure. That's what you want. You could do it. You could do it. Oh yeah, you could do it. The technology and the minds are already there. They could do that tomorrow if they wanted to, but they will never do it because keeping people sick is conducive to their overall end game. Remember, they are preaching the gospel of overpopulation, so they have to cull the herd. They got to do this. All right, they got to do this. And so now this is where we are. As a matter of fact, Dr. Soul, in one of his economic books, forget if it was the basic economics or advanced economics or practical economics, one of those. Anyway, he had documented and proved how this one weed killer, I don't know if it was Roundup or it's one of those weed killer things, that had proven to eradicate malaria. And then it got sued out of its existence, claiming that it caused cancer. Some woman wrote some piece that was never backed up, that was never verified or proven, but it still put the company out of business and billions of dollars in lawsuits. And now malaria cases are back up. It's just because they needed that. There's no money in care. They had to get that person up out of here. Get that product up out of here. It has an alternative purpose for it. And once they found out that it could cure disease, they had to get it up out of here. That's what they do. They have all the money and all the power because of the corruption. So now you got the pharmaceutical companies running the medical schools because they are the benefactor of the medical schools. So they're teaching the doctors what they want them to know. Basically, doctors are licensed drug dealers. That's what they have become in the United States. Doctors are glorified drug dealers. All they do is write prescriptions all day. They write prescriptions. When's the last time your doctor cured you of anything? Any specialty. Your oncologist, your neurologist. When's the last time you were cured of anything? Where's the cure for cancer? How many decades has it been? 60, 70 years at least? They've been taking donations, all these different cancer societies and foundations, and we're no step closer to a cure because they will never allow it. Instead, they treat you with poison. More people die from the treatment than they do of cancer itself, and they die faster. Think of the nefarious setup of the cancer treatment facilities. You go in there one way and come out worse off. Not only do they drain you of all your money and they drain your insurance company of hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you still end up dead also. So they're culling the herd and they're getting rich off of doing it. I think you have more cancer treatment facilities now than you have McDonald's or 7-Elevens or Wendy's. Yeah. Cancer treatment is big business because there is no money in cure-only treatment. We're using archaic, prehistoric, medieval medicine to treat cancer. Poisoning the body to death. You're killing good cells just to get at the bad cells. which, if you think about that theory in practice, isn't that what the military industrial complex has been guilty of? There's an enemy aboard a 747 that has 300 passengers on it. So you blow the plane out of the sky to get just to kill that one person. And then you call all the rest of the innocent deaths collateral damage. So the good cells are now collateral damage of radiating the bad cells. You see how dumb that sounds, how stupid that sounds? Again, when's the last time you ever heard anyone being cured of anything in the United States? Anything, even the common cold. Oh, there's no cure for that. Okay, fine. There's no cure for nothing. They can't cure the simplest of things. No cure, because there's no money in cure, only treatment. Only treatment. People who have come up with the cure have only been ostracized. What was it? Was it that hospital in Ohio that said they had a cure for AIDS, and they had already tested it on X amount of people, and their bodies are 100% free of the HIV virus that causes AIDS? And do you know what happened? That hospital lost its charter and was shut down promptly. They couldn't allow that to happen. Said the hospital was a quack, and they shut them down. That would have really hurt the bottom line of the pharmaceutical industrial complex that holds all those patents for all those different, for that AIDS cocktail treatment thing. Yeah, man. That's the world we live in. You can Google that stuff if they haven't scrubbed it off the internet. You know, they have been really working behind the scenes through all the chaos that they've created to really work hard at scrubbing the internet. They even changed the Google search algorithms so that they make it impossible for you to find what it is you're really looking for. They bury it under hundreds, if not thousands, of pages of miscellaneous things that have nothing to do with what you're searching for. Or they'll make sure that what comes up is their propaganda, so you only hear their one side of the argument. Again, they've been building such enormous walls around the truth. They even changed and added things that never existed before. So if you're looking up one of these controversial topics, all the things that's going to come up on the search results is fake news. So they put fake news headings ahead of the stuff you're looking for. Or they just remove it altogether. It's terrible. I remember being in a barbershop once. We were all having a conversation, and we Googled something, and it came up fake news. So they have removed all the signs that lead north and have replaced it with fake news north. There is no north. It's just west, south, and east. There is no north. That's fake news. Don't go anywhere. Don't go here. Do not cross this line. Danger. It's really danger if you go this way. They're not telling you the truth. It's fake news. There's a shark here waiting for you. There's a lion in the street if you go north. You need to go west or south or east. Don't go north because there's a lion in the street. That's what they do. They build these enormous walls with moats around the truth to prevent you from getting at it or make it nearly impossible for you to get to it. That's what censorship really is. It's keeping you away from the truth. If everything that they were trying to protect was truthful, you wouldn't need to protect it because truth always comes out. But no, they have to hide that. They don't want you getting near the truth. The truth about anything. The truth that socialism is a gateway drug to totalitarianism. They don't want you to hear these critiques. You see, socialism has moved on from the Marxist version of the state owning the means of production to one whereby production remains in the hands of individuals but are heavily regulated, echoing Mussolini's fascist socialist model. Again, no new thing under the sun, just rebranded. All right, so this democratic socialism that says the production remains in the hands of the individuals but are heavily regulated, that's a page out from Mussolini's fascist socialist model. fascist socialist model. Democratic socialism is a fascist socialist model. But after nearly 9 decades, this model faces collapse, much like the Soviet collapse after 67 years. So, as you explore the modern socialist model, which is socialism rebranded, if you take a look at the economic calculation problems identified by the von Mises in 1920, which explains why it still fails in today's socialism, then you'll be able to predict the consequences for governments and their state-issued currencies. Yeah. You see, it is the presidential election in the United States this year. And the choice is between the Republicans or the Democratic socialism. That's what they want. Democrats want socialism. Now, the former being a milder version of the latter. Okay. A further difference is President Trump's administration increasingly pays the government's bills by socializing money, while Great Uncle Joe wants to tax the rich even more, which in practice means not the rich, but the middle and lower classes in actuality, as well as defoliating the magic money tree. It's just magic. Money comes out of thin air. Now, I've already told you on this channel, I am neither Democrat nor Republican. I am independent. I am not pro-Trump, and I'm not against Trump. I'm against anything that is a farce. And so far, the people have been lied to. Democrat and Republicans are the same team, playing on the same team, just different color jerseys doing practice. And that's what you see. You see one side has on the blue jersey, the other one has on the red jersey, and it looks like they're competing against each other on the football field, but they're not. This is a practice scrimmage to prepare them for the next game. So to the unobservant, it looks like, oh, I'm at a football game. I'm watching two teams compete. No, you're not. It's all one team. They all have the same goal. Now in Britain, those who rejoiced at a free marketeer becoming prime minister with a strong electoral mandate have experienced a greater clampdown on personal freedom than imposed by any British government since post-war rationing. Speaking of which, we are rationing now in the United States. Did you know that? Try to go to certain stores and get more than one roll of toilet paper and see what happens. They're starting to ration food and other non-perishable goods like toilet paper and wipes and bleach and things of that nature. No, put that down. You can only get one pack of meat. It's been going on and it's been doing it all year, but it's been kept out of the media. No one's talking about the rationing. Now, admittedly, COVID-19 and its lockdowns were not foreseen, but will the British ever regain any of their restricted freedoms? And those of us with long memories are reflecting that the imposition of taxes, the socializing of our earnings under the conservatives is almost always more onerous than under labor. It was not meant to be like that. One way or another, the establishment's socialization of our wealth, money, and freedom creeps in this petty pace day to day until the last syllable of recorded time. They're going to sneak this in, and that is the end game. That's what they want. Whether we like it or not, doesn't matter who you vote for, you're going to get the president they want you to have. We're all socialists now. It is a fact of our lives, if not our inclinations. The destruction of our money and what wealth we have left is claimed to be the common good as opposed to capitalism, which the socialists tell us enriches the few and is deeply immoral. They, the socialists, have captured the moral high ground, leading us to their higher plane. All right. Now, they allege it is the progress towards a better humanity. Their utopian view sees the end of social inequality as its final goal. And as man progresses towards it, the human race will discard capitalism and the class wars that go along with it. That sounds really good, doesn't it? It sounds like the Magic Kingdom at Disneyland. No longer should we define socialism by its post-Marxian objective, the acquisition by the state of the means of production and the ending of property ownership. The failure of the organizing state to produce goods demanded by the consumer was fully exposed by the collapse of the USSR and the ending of the Chinese state's monopoly on production. But that has not stopped socialism, no, which has simply evolved into a new form dominated by the social democratic model. The title itself is a contradiction. Social is laudable and democratic is inclusive, but put them together and the state has handed power over its electors by its electors. The social democratic philosophy begs some fundamental questions. If it is a better system than the alleged evils of capitalism, then why does social cooperation not evolve towards it at the behest of ordinary people without the need for an organizing government? See the problem? Why are leaders required to coerce, organize, and force people to part with their income and wealth for their own common good? Who benefits? That sounds kind of retarded, wouldn't you think? Those who are said to benefit are the sick, the poor, through the redistribution of wealth. But the evidence is overwhelming that a state bureaucracy is not better at this humane function than independent charities. The socialist rebuttal is that no one should have to rely on charity, to which those who value their freedom are normally too dull-witted to respond by asking, why not? When the alternative is state coercion backed by imprisonment, because that is the model. You do this or else. Everything is done under the pain of death or incarceration. That's what we have. Now, the claims of morality are a thin cover, a disguise for wealth transfer from ordinary people to the state. Once again, it's a disguise for wealth transfer from ordinary people to the state. Notice how I did not say from the rich to the state. I said from ordinary people, you and me, to the state. Let that sink in. The state is now an organization that leeches on its electors in order to pursue its own separate agenda. We must therefore put claims of morality to one side if we are to understand the damage socialism has done to ordinary people and their economic progress. No longer ambitious for the acquisition of the means of production, modern socialism has evolved into a fascist form, a fact which, when pointed out to social democrats, leads to instant denial and horror, because in their language, it is right-wing and extreme, wrongly associated with free market capitalism. So, do we have people being fascist without even knowing it? The accusation that social democratic planning is fascism is easily proved. Now, some claim fascism origins were in the 19th century when European philosophers expressed ideas which were only later described as fascist. But the fascist movement proper started in Italy when Benito Mussolini, then an avowed Marxist, was the most forceful Italian proponent of the Marxian paradise to come. In 1914, on the declaration of the Great War, Italian communists declared it to be a fight between imperialists and exploiters of the proletariat. In their view, the proletariat should stand aside and not be exploited by either side, waiting for the inevitable civil war, which would pave the way to the destruction of capitalism, giving power to the workers, power to the people. That was their idea. But having initially taken the Italian communist position of abstaining from war, Mussolini then aligned himself with the nationalists against the imperialist Austrians. It was an opportunist move and a grab for support from the communist rank and file. Following the First World War, the Italian Communist Party movement faltered, and Mussolini, with his new fascist party, stepped into the void. Because why? Because nobody likes a void. And you know what happens when there's a vacuum. Members left the communists and joined Mussolini's fascists in droves because there was little discernible difference between Mussolini's socialism and that of the Italian Marxists. His 1919 manifesto was anti-capitalist and posed as socialism with renewed vigor. Sound like Bernie Sanders, doesn't it? From there, it evolved into advocating aggressive interventionism and then towards Nazism, which was developing in parallel. The Nazi economic creed was simple. Capitalists can own the means of production so long as they obey the commands of the state. In other words, business was directed and regulated instead of owned by the state. It nearly describes the socialism of today. Socialists no longer deem it necessary for the state to own the means of production. It merely controls it by regulation, directing it by selective subsidies and taxes. It also exposes the intellectual ignorance of the useful idiots who blindly follow their slogans. So, what does the loss of means of economic calculation and loss of production really mean for us in 2020? Well, we have established that the objectives of today's social democrats are a little different in principle from those of the fascists in the interwar years. But this modifies our analysis from that of Ludwig von Mises in 1920, who wrote an important essay titled Economic Calculation in the Socialist Commonwealth, which sparked that became known as the Socialist Calculation Debate. Mises demonstrated why public ownership of the means of production was bound to fail. Central to his argument was the state's inability to make the calculations necessary to allocate the means of production, a function which can only be attempted successfully by independent entrepreneurs putting their own resources on the line. No skin in the game, and you see how that plays out. You got to have skin in the game. You can't be just some hired hand. You got to have skin in the game. Today's institutional socialism is now fascist instead of being on the Marxist lines, which were debated between Mises and socialist economists a century ago. The failure of Marxist socialism was for the reason Mises predicted. It must still apply today to that portion of a socialist economy that relates to government spending, which is not redistributed in the form of welfare payments or put out to private sector contracts by means of competitive tender. When that remains of government, expenditure will lack the basis of economic calculation, which cannot be performed. But welfare distributions and government contracts raise a separate issue: the distortion of an economy by state directing spending into spending that would not otherwise occur, and the wasteful use of all forms of capital. wasteful use of all forms of capital, which would otherwise be deployed more efficiently by private enterprise. Again, what do you have left? A debacle. Economic activities that remain under free market principles, whereby entrepreneurs seek to profit by anticipating the needs and wants of consumers successfully, are now heavily regulated and restricted. Got your both hands tied behind your back. State bureaucrats effectively control the forms and characteristics of goods and services offered by producers. They claim to protect the consumer from unscrupulous capitalist profiteers. Sometimes regulations imposed by the state succeed in this objective, but it is wrong to argue that free markets would not have matched or even provided higher standards of product than those framed by the state's regulatory regime, because it is manifestly in every producer's interest to produce the best product for the market, unless that is the state regulator protects the producer from competition. This too often is the case. That's right. The state regulator protects the producer from competition. Remember your boy. What did he say? Competition is a sin. All right. So what do the big, powerful corporations do? They go and lobby the legislators and say, you know what you need to do? You need to make it a rule that you can't even come into the space that we operate in unless you got like $5 billion of working capital. Why would I want to do that? Well, because of this briefcase right here. Oh, consider it done. Thank you very much. That's what they do. That's the job of a lobbyist, to beat people over the head with a briefcase full of money. Now, why bureaucracy fails and free markets succeed? Because the bureaucrats and their supporters, the socialists and trade unions, do not understand prices. They firmly believe in the cost theory of prices, whereby the price of a final product is set by the cost of production. It is also central to Marxist economics, which evolved before marginal price theory and declared prices to be determined by the cost of labor and therefore exploitive. But the Austrian economist Karl Menger was one of three independent discoverers of marginal price theory in the 1870s. Menger showed that in free markets, prices are purely subjective. In other words, prices are set by consumer preferences, and it is up to the producer to participate and then respond to them. Because if you break it down the way things work today, if ABC company does not produce the widgets with the functionality that the consumer wants, they're going to go to XYZ company and buy it from them, even if the production is not necessarily up to the standard of ABC company. Why? Because XYZ is providing the service, the product that the consumers demand, want, and need. So you don't have to be a company that provides what your customers want, but then guess what? Someone else is going to. And then they're going to steal your customers and take over your market share, no matter how small your market share may be. That's what the free market does. The free market allows its competitors to rise or fail to the occasion based on their own merit and based on what consumers do. Consumers are the most powerful voters in the world because they vote with their wallets. They vote with their feet. If this restaurant's food is nasty compared to the other restaurant, guess where people are going to be eating lunch? Get it? Now, it is this division between the bureaucratic socialist belief and the free market evidence that separates two entirely different propositions: the state's bureaucratic management and the free markets. Now, it is only by understanding how different systems operate that we can explain the flaws of bureaucracy in an economic context. Free markets work on the basis of the ownership of property and its unfettered deployment and development of the production of goods and services. Now, property used in production takes its value from it, which is why giving property no value By monopolizing it, economic calculations cannot take place. So it is a socialist myth that private ownership gives capitalists power over people. It is true that capitalists are in command of resources, but their masters are their customers, the consumer, who they must satisfy by organizing their property and other resources effectively. Now, in economic terms, it is the purest form of democracy. All right, remember that. The market decides and dictates to the corporation, look, this is the product that we need, what we want, this is the service that we want, that we need. Either you're going to give it to us or someone else is. If someone else gives it to us, that means you're not making any sales, you're being run out of business due to your failure to comply with the demands, the supply and demand. The demand is for this. You want to give us that. That's a problem. That's a problem. Okay? That's a myth. That is a socialist myth that private ownership gives capitalists power over the people. No, because you vote with your feet, with your money. You get to set the pace. If people want to drink Coke over Pepsi, what happens to Pepsi? See what I'm saying? They don't have no control over you. You're not forced to drink a Pepsi or a Coke. You have choice. Now, if Coke is superior in all aspects than Pepsi, then people are going to drink Coke. More Coke will be drank than Pepsi. So don't say that, well, because of the capitalism, they control us. They don't control you. You don't have to drink Coke or Pepsi. You can say, I'll drink water. Forget both of y'all. You see what I'm saying? It's the purest form of democracy. However, the regulatory burden on established sectors producing goods and services has become increasingly onerous. Being forced to satisfy the regulators instead of customers, businesses are decreasingly focused on customers. Did you hear that? Today, companies are forced to appease regulators instead of customers. Therefore, businesses are not even focused on customers. Daddy government says you got to do this. Customers say, please don't do that. Who are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to the state, because the state can shut you down. They can come in there with armed machine guns and physically shut you down. Now, the regulator replaces the customer completely in the scale of importance when the provider of goods or services is guaranteed a margin over cost and given a monopoly by the state. Now, these businesses extend the state's control over the consumer, and while nominally in the private sector should be regarded as part of the state for the purposes of economic analysis, because they operate on a status cost plus regulated margin basis. This is why you got to get the government out of the way. They have no business being in the industry like this, but they are. You have government overregulation in every aspect of the economy, and it's destroying the economy. Why do you think other countries have better products and services than we do in the United States? There are reasons for that. The United States is mad limited. One of the most egregious sections of the economy that I can think of, because I operate in it every day, is the stock market. The government has clamped down with so many regulations, so much red tape and bureaucracy that Americans don't even have a fraction of choice like they do in other countries. There's so many financial products that are not available to the public in the United States that you cannot trade and or invest in. You are locked out of the market. We have been effectively locked out of the markets The markets we're trading today is not even a fraction of the markets that are available to operate in. Case in point, you can't trade spot in the United States. You cannot trade spot metals in the United States. Again, you cannot trade spot metals in the United States. You can't do it. Can't do it. Why can't you do it? Because the government said you can't. Are they protecting us from something? Absolutely not. Because you used to be able to trade spot metals in 2009, 2010. You could trade spot metals no problem. But now you can't because the government says you can't. Not because it's protecting you from anything. It's just because they said you can't. So the regulator replaces the customer. The government has now become the customer. Now, this allows for influences such as these. Unfettered private sectors in modern economies are less important than commonly thought, most businesses being more burdened by bureaucratic management and control than is generally realized. Supposedly, free markets are being directed by bureaucrats and administrators who have opted for an easy life of secure income and pensions, where they do not have to make judgments, but only to administer regulations without any further thought or responsibility for their actions. Who pays for this all? People don't like to talk about who pays for it. An economy run by the state owning the means of production cannot succeed because it cannot recalculate. It can't calculate. It can only resort to force, evidenced by the masses killed by the Soviets and Chinese communists in their attempts to get Marxist socialism to stick. Now that that form of socialism has been exposed by its failures, modern socialism is in a halfway house of some remnants of state ownership coupled with fascist control and regulation over private production. It is not difficult to see why contemporary economies are struggling under these burdens. And we do not need to resort to empirical evidence to assist with an explanation. But with modern economies overburdened by economic inefficiencies arising from state-directed malinvestment of scarce capital, they're heading for the same general failure experienced by the Soviets. We have history as our guide. A similar collapse of our socialistic governments has only been deferred so far by the partial existence of markets. But as an economic policy, increasing rates of wealth transfer from producers and consumers through taxation to sustain the socialistic state has finally run out of road. Cries to soak the rich by even higher taxes are failing to convince the wider public that there is a course to be followed. Now that we are in the grip of the COVID-19 crisis, ordinary people know that the ending of government support schemes cannot be replaced with higher taxes to recoup lost government revenue without crashing the economy. It is only the bureaucrats in government offices securing their jobs and pensions acting as unthinking functionaries who miss this vital point. There can only be one desperate solution, the one understood by central bankers who reaffirm they will print whatever it takes to fund government deficits. So we're talking about QE infinity. They will never stop printing. Now, when socialists run out of people to rob of their wealth by overt taxation, they inflate. Did you know that? They inflate. In modern times, it has been a process that dates back to the Depression of the 1930s. This fascist social construct has now been evolving for 87 years in America. If we take Franklin Roosevelt's socializing policies and his ban on owning gold as a starting point, even longer than the Soviet experiment, which started with the foundation of the Soviet Union in 1922 and ended with the collapse of the Berlin Wall in 1989. Over the last 40 years, the U.S. economy has been financialized. That is to say, economic resources have shifted from the non-financial economy to the financial. It is the consequence of the financial reforms of the 1980s when London underwent its big bang and America abandoned the Glass-Steagall Act, which had banned retail banks from investment banking activities. Through the combination of these events, banks took over all financial activities, including market making in securities, commodities, and derivatives, using bank credit expansion to apply virtually unlimited capital resources to these functions. Thank you, Glass-Steagall Act being abandoned. Being licensed by governments, it has become an extension of statist control over prices, with the benefit that through their banking agents, governments could use the expansion of broad money supply to finance government spending and spend the wealth effect and spread it all over the place, spreading that wealth effect through rising stock markets while suppressing commodity prices by increasing their synthetic supply. You see how they have been controlling the markets. You want to know why precious metals haven't been really priced correctly and moving the way they should? This is why. This is why. The cost of this financialization has been economic stagnation in non-financial activities, with the production of goods exported to the savings-driven economies of Eastern Asia, while the banks have become dependent on financial speculation for their profits. They're now failing in their original mandate to sustain non-financial businesses. Boom. As well as its normal cyclical failures, the banking system now faces the consequences of the failure of socialism itself, from which they have benefited in the past through the socialization of money through the inflation of bank credit. Who says there's no inflation? COVID-19 and its lockdowns have exposed the fragility of the whole system, bankrupting businesses and making the banks reluctant to lend, preferring to call in their loans. Any independent observer of economic developments can only come to one logical conclusion. Financing economic expansion by bank credit has finally come to an end, and widespread bank failures are becoming impossible to avoid. The inflation of money as a means of financing the state now falls increasingly on central banks, even without a banking crisis. And here it is worth noting that the US dollar bank credit is a current multiple of M1 money supply of 3 rate until the Lehman crisis, a significantly faster pace since then, and finally a nearly vertical rate since last March. All indicated when you look at the numbers. We now must consider how inflationary financing will progress in the absence of bank credit being made available to the non-financial private sector. That's why Mr. Buffett, acting as an agent of the Fed, backstopped Bank of America with billions of dollars of investing. Bank lending to the private non-financial sector is currently $11 trillion, twice the M1 figure, giving us an indication of how narrow money must increase from its current accelerated rate if the Fed is to prevent an imminent economic slump in the non-financial economy. And that is before we consider another important factor, which requires inflationary financing. the maintenance of the financial asset bubble, which is central to the illusion that all is well. You got to have the sizzle even without a steak. The magnitude of central bank monetary inflation yet to come is far greater and therefore bound to radically undermine the dollar's purchasing power even further. It's already lost about 95% of its purchasing power. Now you want to take away the remaining 5% too. Now, in turn, the U.S. government's finances will be undermined by the quantity of dollars required and the effect of dollar interest rates. Other nations are in a far worse position, and like the USSR in the late 1980s, are rapidly running out of options. The Fed is running out of bullets. So, in conclusion, the analysis has exposed the failings of government intervention in free markets. Predictably, the increasing burden of government intervention on any economy will cause it to underperform, detracting from the primary function of free markets, which is to satisfy the needs and wants of who? The consumers. Consumers consume because they are employed. Consumers consume, specializing in their labor to maximize their output and therefore their ability to buy the things they need and want. How are you going to buy stuff when you don't have a job? But over the decades, consumers have been increasingly dependent on governments, either to employ them as bureaucrats or to employ them as officials and nationalize education and health systems, or to guarantee their employment through regulations. They benefit most from free markets, but lack an understanding and sympathy for those free markets. The loss of free markets and their vilification by socialists is likely to ensure that when the current international socialist regime fails, free markets will be blamed. You got to have a fall guy. You got to have a fall guy. We appear to be rapidly approaching that point of failure. All right. You can see already how narrow money supply has already accelerated into three phases, and how the failure of bank credit expansion will lead to an even greater debasement of the currency, and that is likely to be the most optimistic outcome, assuming bank failures will be strictly limited instead of systematically widespread. All right? You don't want it to be systemically widespread. You don't want that at all. Now, the status dependency on inflationary financing is set to increase to the point where all confidence in fiat currencies will be lost. Why do you think there's a crypto market? You thought it just fell out of the sky? We've made comparisons with the failure of the USSR after 67 years, noting that the current fascistic socialization model has already run for 87. When the USSR failed, there was a better economic model for which the Soviets could refer. The standard of living and plentiful supplies of food and consumer goods in the Western shops were a ready comparison with Soviet misery, and it was relative economic freedom that had delivered. Our failure will not have that comparison. Instead, it is likely that status will point towards another economic model in the hope of continuing with state control. All right, so all they're going to do is switch from the left hand to the right hand because, again, like I've always told you, people in power tend to want to remain in power. It will be a muddle that lasts for as long as governments in their bankruptcy try to maintain control over economic events. We will need as many people as possible to explain to the politicians that the way to national wealth is not through socialism, but by free markets and small government. All right, people say, we know the problem, what's the solution? I just gave it to you. We need as many people as possible to explain to the politicians that the way to national wealth is not through socialism, but by free markets and small government. If we had free markets and small government, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But lo and behold, here we are. Here we are. That does it for this edition of the pre-market PulseScan. Hopefully you got something out of what we talked about today, and hopefully you'll take it to heart and take advantage of things before it's too late. What do I mean by that? What I mean is things are about to change. You want to get ahead of things, and that's why you need to get into these markets and make as much money as you can, because it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough for a minute, for a while. For a lot of people, it's going to be hard. It's going to be real hard. So do what you can while you can. Don't put off for tomorrow what you can do today. That's basically what it boils down to. And with that being said, you know what it is, PulseWaveTrading.com. And remember, bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So remember to take what you can and give nothing back. And I am out. Purge.